So, good evening, everybody. You're all very welcome to another programme with us, Social Rights Ireland. I'm Roisin, and we're here with our comrades from the Peadar O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum. And tonight we're joined by Tommy McKerney, Barry Murray, and Patricia Campbell representing the Forum. We have our guest speaker, Dr. Saeb Shaat, with us tonight, and we're waiting to hear from Abdullah Al-Zaghari from the Palestinian Prisoners Society in the West Bank. And we also hope to be joined by Charlotte Cates, who is the International Coordinator for the Samadown Palestinian Prisoners Network, Solidarity Network. They're not here at the minute, but we hope that there won't be too many technical impediments getting in the way and that they'll join us shortly. In the meantime, I'd like to go over to Dr. Saeb Shaat, who's based in Belfast and who is a regular guest speaker with us on the programme. Tonight's programme focuses on the Palestinian prisoners right now, who upon deciding, when we decided the title for tonight's show, it was on the back of the news, the horrific news, that the Knesset had passed the death penalty, that it was making it legal for the prisoners, Palestinian prisoners only, by the way, to be hanged, and that their hanging would be imminent. So those of you who have been following us will know very well that the Peadar O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum have a campaign which is called 5 for Palestine, and they have 5 demands for the prisoners of Palestine. And that's a long running campaign. And I have to say special credit actually to Comrade Patricia Campbell, who has done an awful lot of work and continues to do an awful lot of work behind the scenes. And she is there every single day, very quietly, I have to say, working on behalf as an advocate for the prisoners in Palestine. And no better woman, because she was a brilliant advocate for our own prisoners of war here in Ireland during the 70s, 80s and 90s. So it's great to have you, Patricia. Saeb, over to you now for those maybe who aren't following as closely, if you could give us an update on the situation that the prisoners of Palestine are facing as they are trapped in the most horrific circumstances in dungeons at this moment in time. And we're talking about thousands of people.
Okay. Hello to you and to everyone. And I want to second what you said about Patricia. Without Patricia, I won't be able to form that the prisoners kind of activities happening in Ireland. Salute to you, Patricia. Abdullah, the head of the Palestinian Society, or the Prisoners Clubs, as I call it myself, he sent me a message. He said the 5 minutes he's in, coming from Bethlehem, he'll be with us. Before starting, we get to state that the Palestinian people are already being executed on a daily basis while working in their farms, businesses, or even inside their own homes at the hands of violent settlers and soldiers who burn their homes, farms, private property, and kill a lot of their own, even livestock, or stealing it. So the Palestinians are systematically killed, and their killers faces no demand of accountability. The Zionists are not original in introducing such practices, or the death law, as we call it. They are copying what the British Empire, their masters in the British empires, left for them, who were very excessive, the British, in their torturing and abusing and executing of Palestinian prisoners. Such executions are engraved in the Palestinian collective psyche and national memory. We can hear it in the Palestinian folk music, especially about the 3 leaders of the Palestinian, what they call it, the Revolution of Burak, or the Wailing Wall revolt of 1929. You can hear the name Muhammad Jamjoom and Fuad Hijazi, who was a graduate of the American University, Beirut at the time, and Ata Zir. They were in the 17th of June, were executed by the British for leading this protest against the British occupation and the intensifying of the Zionist immigration to Palestine. The British occupied Palestine from the 1917 till 48, when they handed over Palestine with all the British colonial military infrastructure, the police networks which were built by the Black and Tan and their torture chambers, the imprisonment and internment laws and dungeons, infrastructure, the Zionist terror gangs who they imported from Europe mastered the technique the British left for them, and they went further in their own kind of excessive terror and violence. In the last 2.5 years alone, at least 87 Palestinian captives have been killed in these British-built Zionist networks of torture. So passing that death penalty law at such time was not incidental. It's specifically after less than a month when the Zionist entity, judicial and political regimes dropped all the charges against their criminal soldiers who executed a mass raping of Palestinian captives at their torture camp of the prison or military prison called Sidi Timan, providing their satanic soldiers and demon colonial settlers population with an impunity of any kind of violence they commit against the Palestinian captives and occupied population. So the Zionist entity branches of legislative council like the Knesset, the executive branch of the government, and judicial authorities as courts and Supreme Court, etc., are all a multi-layered apartheid system who already normalize extreme violence, including sexual violence, killing, extermination, massacring, genocide, engineered famine, and starvation of people who are under their occupation. The Zionist entity is a killing machine in its own that targets the Palestinians and you know, like we can remember the story. It's just hit me now. I seen a video couple of maybe a week ago or under 10 days of little children coming from Egypt. Maybe 10 of them were around the age of 10, and the mothers were just like grabbing them from the Red Cross, the bus who brought them to the Gaza crossing at the time. These were the premature babies, some of the survived premature babies, which the Zionist entity left them to die in their incubators in Shifa Hospital. Some being taken away before the Zionist entity's army occupied the hospital. And this is the few just survived. It's heartbreaking when you see them babies looking at their mothers, you know, they are 2 years of age, don't recognize them. And the mother, straight away, the mother recognizes its own child. So this is the practice when we seen in hospitals. They shooting the patients, they were killing the medics and bury them alive with their ambulances, targeting journalists, targeting and burn them alive in their own tents. Doctors sniped inside the hospitals and kidnapped and forced disappeared. Pregnant women being killed. As they say, 1 bullet, 2 kills. Children used by the Zionists as a sniper target practice. So, and this mass incarcerations as well of Palestinian is a feature of the Zionist entity, that's its apartheid regime. As of March 26, there is about under just 10,000 Palestinian prisoners, maybe roughly around 9,600, held in inhumane conditions inside the Zionist entity's dungeons. Half of the captives are under administrative detention, as they try to label them, unlawful confinements, without a trial and with no ability to defend themselves. In addition, people in Gaza speak of a huge number of kidnapped people without any trace or any information about thereabout. Over 25,000 people I'm talking about forced disappeared One of them is a cousin of mine who used to be the director of Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, Dr. Hamouda. We don't have even any piece of information about him. So the Zionist entity, when we say it's a death cult who glorifies the killing of Palestinians. We saw live on TV when they passed the law, the Zionist ministers and the lawmakers and legislators in the parliament wearing the golden pin shaped like a gallows noose pinned to their colors and popping champagne bottles celebrating the passing of the execution by hanging that law. So this death penalty initialize a state mechanism for executing Palestinians. The law is worded perfectly to apply to Palestinian captives only and set to normalize their execution. So the death penalty will be determined in military courts and where only Palestinians tried in these courts. There is no Israelis will be tried in a military court. The courts have an approximately 96% conviction rate that based largely on confession extracted from the Palestinian captives under duress and torture. The severe condition these captives exist under extreme violence, horrific psychological and physical torture. During such misery, the captives are interrogated, and some of them cannot even breathe or continue the will to live. So I will just read part of what that phrase from the law. They say a person who intentionally cause the death of another with the aim of harming a citizen or residents of Israel with the intent of rejecting the existence of the state of Israel. This is very important because the penalty execution by hanging then after that must be carried out within 90 days of sentencing with no possibility of pardon. In addition, the military court judges will no longer be required to reach unanimous decision. A simple majority will do, and once the sentence has been handed down, there will be no possibility of a pardon or any reduction of the sentence. This law, if we hear some of the wordings, this law is clearly designed to install defeat within the Palestinian collective psyche, to defeat the Palestinian struggle for self-determination and deny Palestinian people any hope of setting up a viable Palestinian state or entity with territorial and political and cultural continuity. Since this struggle, even in non-violent struggle, can be interpreted as an intent of rejecting the existence of the state of Israel as the law worded. So a Palestinian who defending his own family or property against extreme violent settlers attacks or a new kind of wave of expulsion can be executed in this law, since this law is 100% political and is designed to erase the Palestinian existence in historical Palestine. Since the Palestinians in Palestine are under Zionist entity occupation and have the right to resist the Zionist violent occupation, then will frame them with that law for hanging, since they are rejecting the existence of the Zionist entity over the occupied land. This is the danger from this law. So the death penalty law is no surprise for the Palestinians. It comes along with the Zionist entities genocide in Gaza Strip and the intensification of relentless settler attacks on the occupied West Bank. Refugee camps in the West Bank were bombed and destroyed and depopulated, and today they turned into the Zionist occupation military bases. I don't want to speak any further. I want to leave it to Abdullah, if you don't mind, the rest.
Thank you very much, Saeb, for that. I don't see Abdullah here yet. Do you, Saeb?
He said to me in the minutes he'll be there.
So we'll give him a few minutes because I do see Charlotte Cates. Hello, Charlotte. Can you hear us?
Hello, yes, I can hear you.
Hi, Charlotte. I'm Roisin from the Social Rights Ireland, and thank you very much. I believe Patricia and yourself were in touch, so thanks for coming along. I wonder if you'd like to share your screen, your video screen, Charlotte, and maybe I can then formally introduce you. This is Charlotte Cates. She's
Hello, Charlotte.
Hello.
How are
Hi,
you keeping?
Charlotte.
Good to
Hi.
see you
Charlotte
finally.
is the international coordinator, just for those who may have joined late, of the Samadun Palestinian Prisoners Solidarity Network. You're very welcome, Charlotte. You might have caught some of Dr. Saeb's introduction there, but it's great to have you here because you maybe, as Saeb had said before, maybe you came into the room that you would have, a minute by minute up to date understanding of what's actually happening. So, and from your end, if you could tell us, I suppose, what the Prisoner Solidarity Network does and your understanding of current conditions and the situation right now in Palestine.
Yes, of course. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation to join you today. And thanks to you and thanks to Dr. Saab for the introduction, which in many ways covered many of the most important elements of this law itself and of its where it is situated in the overall, Zionist settler colonial project and the genocidal assault on the Palestinian people as a whole, and specifically targeting the Palestinian prisoners within that context. Um, my name is Charlotte Cates. I'm the international coordinator of Samidun. We are a network of organizers and activists, an international Arab and Palestinian network that is active in countries around the world, organizing to uphold and defend the Palestinian prisoners and struggle for their liberation as part and parcel of the liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea. And so, to that end, we're engaged in, all kinds of advocacy, whether that's hosting events, putting together, papers and educational forums, uh, organizing interactions with liberated prisoners, campaigning, protesting, taking to the streets. I should say that Sami Dune has been designated as a so-called specially designated global terrorist by the United States and designated a terrorist entity by Canada and prescribed or banned in Germany. Basically solely because of our political speech and our activities. And specifically, I mean, the way that we see this is that this isn't like an attack on just Sami Dune as an organization, but is meant as an attack on the Palestinian prisoners. Because we have always centered our work around the struggle of the Palestinian prisoners, not only because Palestinian prisoners are the victims of horrific torture, abuse, medical neglect, physical, psychological, and sexual torture and assault, and all forms of mistreatment, but also because Palestinian prisoners are at the center of the leadership of the Palestinian struggle for liberation and return and at the heart of the Palestinian resistance. And so the occupation and the imperialist powers that fund, supply, and arm the occupation essentially want to isolate the Palestinian prisoners. They want to deprive them of even legal visits, family visits, of any information getting out about them. Just like Dr. Saeb was talking about in relationship to the case of Hossam Abu Safia and some of the medical workers from Gaza. And so the work of Sami Dune has always been about attempting to break the isolation of the Palestinian prisoners, even symbolically and even metaphorically, by popularizing them internationally, by speaking about their stories, by publicizing their writings, by upholding them as leaders not only of the Palestinian cause, but of our international anti-imperialist movement. And so the occupation and the imperialist powers essentially want to isolate the Palestinian prisoners. They want these leaders and strugglers and resistors to be forcibly isolated. But by all means, even that their words and thoughts and analysis cannot reach the international public, let alone the Palestinian people. So that's why Samadun is targeted because they view us as, in the same way that many organizations and activists are targeted because of their work on Palestine. But in our case, it's because they view us essentially as an international arm of the Palestinian prisoners movement. So when and so not just of the Palestinian prisoners as those who are imprisoned, but as those who write, who come together, who unify, who develop political programs, who play an active role in leading their organizations and thereby leading the entire Palestinian liberation movement. The this and so this new execution law, I mean, obviously, and I don't want to repeat anything that was already said. Obviously, this comes out of like a long history of the massive killing and slaughter and genocide of the Palestinian people. It comes out of the history of British colonialism in Palestine. And, specifically, it was in it was the British executions of Palestinian revolutionaries who were imprisoned during the British Mandate that served as one of the launching points, kind of, for the Palestinian prisoners movement as a whole, and how the Palestinian prisoners are viewed within Palestinian society, within the national liberation movement, within the international movement. And so, much like administrative detention, detention without charge or trial, under which over 3,600 Palestinians are currently being held, you know, the execution of Palestinians, much like home demolitions, the explosion and destruction of Palestinians' homes and their families' homes because they participate in resistance. These are all things that were part of the British emergency regulations for Palestine and then were immediately adopted by the Zionists. Once you had that transfer of colonial power, you might have had some intra-colonial competition after years of cooperation for a few years there in the 1940s. But fundamentally, this was a transfer of colonial power rather than a change in the system. And so the Zionists continued to impose those emergency regulations on the Palestinian people. And the only reason why the Zionist regime has not openly killed Palestinian prisoners. And I do want to say openly killed Palestinian prisoners because there have been hundreds of Palestinians martyred inside the occupation jails, from 1948 until the present day. There have been nearly 100 simply since October 7th of 2023. And this, of course, comes hand in hand with the other primary weapon of the Zionist entity targeting Palestinians' ability to organize and resist at all levels, whether that's through organizing students' movements, trade unions, women's organizations, land defense movements, or armed struggle. There have been, two mechanisms that the Zionists have primarily used hand in hand with one another, and those have been incarceration and assassination. And so we've seen the massive use of assassination. We continue to see that being used today, both in Palestine as well as in Lebanon, as well as in Iran. The attempt to essentially undo a revolutionary movement or resistance structure by targeting its leaders for assassination or for incarceration. And so these tactics, have been used hand in hand with one another as colonial tools by the occupation from its inception until the present day. And those assassinations have continued behind the prison walls as well. Again, there have been hundreds of Palestinians martyred. When we look at a number of the martyrdom of prisoners that have taken place since October 7th at the hands of the occupation. Um, these have happened not through kind of random acts of torture and abuse, just kind of generically used against the Palestinian population, although certainly that has happened as well because we are looking at a genocidal entity which is basically engaged in genocidal violence against the Palestinian people as a whole. Um, but in many cases, for example, in the case of Dr. Iyad al-Rantisi and Dr. Adnan al-Bursh, these are two of along with Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, two of the most prominent medical workers who were abducted from Gaza. And they were both horrifically, physically and sexually tortured and assassinated inside the Zionist occupation jails. Um, they they were, deliberately targeted for assassination. This was also the case for Palestinian prisoners from the West Bank. There was a case of a Palestinian man from Tulkarm who had won his freedom and who was allegedly involved in organizing the resistance in Tulkarm. So this was happening at the same time that the occupation was sending drones and planes to carry out assassinations in Tulkarm camp and Nur Shams camp, as well as in villages in the surrounding area to kind of destroy the centers of resistance that were holding on in the northern West Bank. They abducted this liberated prisoner, and less than 1 week later, he was assassinated behind bars under severe torture. And he was viewed by the Zionists as a leader in revitalizing and arming the Al-Qassam brigades in Tulkarm. This is an assassination carried out behind bars. So if we look at these, 100 plus assassinations in the past 2.5 years inside Zionist jails, and the way in which the notorious fascist Itamar Ben-Gvir has spoken about these killings, has spoken about the torture, has, spoken proudly about the right to rape Palestinians for occupation soldiers, has repeatedly gone in with the media to sort of display Palestinian prisoners being tortured. And now, of course, as Saeb explained earlier, celebrating the passage of this legislation in a very kind of gruesome way. This is all part of one policy, and it's an attempt to impose a legal cover on the ongoing genocide behind bars, which continues to be practiced. It's an attempt to impose a legal cover on just kind of this brutal practice of torture. And it's worth noting here that, yes, of course, this is a violation of, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. It's a violation of international law. It's a violation of human rights conventions. But first and foremost, the Zionist entity has absolutely no right to imprison or legislate against Palestinians because there is no right for there to be an occupation in the first place. So, and furthermore, Palestinians have an absolute right to resist that occupation by all means, including and particularly through the use of armed struggle. So therefore, while yes, the law as it is written, is absolutely in breach of international law and human rights conventions. It is illegitimate at a far deeper level and a far more profound level. It is illegitimate at the level of the Zionist entity itself. And I think this is something that's important for us to remember, that we're not merely cataloging kind of the types of violations of international law that have taken place, particularly at a time when international law has so horrifically failed the Palestinian people as a whole, but that we're also looking at, a fundamentally illegitimate system that is itself um, illegal, both under the terms of law, but also under the sense of any kind of human decency, dignity, and morality. Finally, just to note in terms of, the under this law, the death penalty is mandatory in the military courts for any act of resistance. Um, is mandatory in the military courts for any act of resistance in which occupation soldiers and settlers are killed. It is also one of two possibilities in the civil courts, but once again, we are talking about a situation in which it's labeled a security case. So that's a case where the existence of the state of Israel is what's being attacked. So this is why it also, even though it primarily targets Palestinian prisoners in the West Bank, it also applies to Palestinians in Jerusalem and occupied Palestine 48 who are tried within the so-called civil courts. And those civil courts accept the same torture evidence. They accept this. They're not, they are different than the military courts, but they're not better. They're simply another form of the same system. Also, want to note here in this context that there is a separate and parallel piece of legislation that's being advanced that is specifically aims to, because this legislation is forward-looking, so it's supposed to be applied moving forward. The parallel piece of legislation related to Gaza is specifically meant to target the Palestinian prisoners from Gaza who have already been abducted from Gaza, those who were abducted from Gaza itself, who were allegedly resisting the occupation and the genocide, and those who were imprisoned on October 7th during the crossing of Al-Aqsa flood for also, again, resisting genocide. And the attempt is to create a new piece of legislation specifically to impose the death penalty and impose execution on this set of prisoners as well. And just finally to say that, many of the leaders of the Palestinian struggle, people like Marwan Barghouti or Ahmed Sadat, the General Secretary of the PFLP, people like Hassan Salama, Ibrahim Hamed, Jamal Abu Haja, really many, many, many of the leaders of the Palestinian liberation movement. Abdullah Barghouti, Motassem Shraim, many, many more, Anas Jaradat. These are people who are serving multiple life sentences within occupation jails. In the case of Abdullah Barghouti, 66 life sentences. In the case of Ibrahim Hamed, 45. In the case of Marwan Barghouti, 4. That means that under this legislation, they would have been automatically assigned the death penalty and executed within 90 days. This is an attempt to prevent the continued formation of the leadership of the Palestinian prisoners movement. It's an attempt to wipe out the revolutionary schools that the prisoners have turned the dungeons of the occupier into, despite all of the torture, starvation, and abuse. It is also one of the other provisions is that it aims to prevent prisoner exchanges. And I think this is very important to talk about because, of course, the most effective means of releasing Palestinian prisoners has always historically been by the Palestinian resistance achieving an exchange with the occupation, or in some cases, the Lebanese resistance achieving an exchange with the occupation. It has never been through the courts or through peace talks or through agreements. It has always been through the power and strength of the resistance. So by labeling um, prisoner exchange is illegal. This is attempting to remove the incentive from the resistance to seek to capture occupation soldiers in order to exchange them for Palestinian prisoners. However, it's very important to note that prisoner exchanges are not part of the law in the first place. Prisoner exchanges are carried out as a matter of military necessity and national security, and so the possibility of defeating this law through prisoner exchange remains highly relevant and highly important. This is why recently in the statement of Abu Ubaidah, the spokesperson of the Izzadin al-Qassam Brigades, the military spokesperson of the Izzadin al-Qassam Brigades, was urging Hezbollah here in Lebanon to do everything that they can to capture occupation soldiers, because the reality is that prisoner exchange remains the primary mechanism of securing the liberation of the Palestinian prisoners, and thereby also resistance remains the primary mechanism of bringing down this legislation. But at the same time, it is certainly incumbent on all of us around the world to do everything that we can to aid in that process by imposing real, meaningful consequences and accountability on the occupation regime for its crimes against the Palestinian prisoners, which are part and parcel of the genocide against the Palestinian people as a whole, through meaningful boycott, economic, academic, cultural, and sports isolation, uh, direct action targeting arms manufacturers and shutting down the war machine, and of course, holding the United States, the imperialist powers, responsible, because it's not just in Iran, that the US and many of the European powers and the British and the Zionists are collaborating. It is also in every single one of these crimes against the Palestinian prisoners. And so this is the battle to defend the Palestinian prisoners is the same battle to bring an end to their genocidal aggression on Iran, on Lebanon, and throughout the region.
Oh, Charlotte, that was absolutely brilliant. And the time that you had, you covered so much ground, very comprehensive. And to have you here all the way from Lebanon as well, because the heroic people of Lebanon as well are putting up such a huge fight against the Zionist terrorists at this moment in time too. So solidarity, Charlotte, and thank you for everything that you're doing. Education is one part of it. So it was very special actually to have you here tonight, and I know it's late into the night where you are now. So thank you. We're very grateful to you for joining us. Saeb, I wonder, have you made contact with Abdullah yet?
He sent me a message. He said, "Is the conversation English and Arabic?" I wrote to him it's English, and he didn't haven't come back to me. I think he's already arrived to his house, but
Okay.
just to check that. I hope he'll be with us
Okay. And in
soon.
the meantime, I'd especially like to welcome and introduce Tommy McKerney and Barry Murray to you, Charlotte, because neither of these two men are strangers to this prison system. And I'd like to invite Tommy maybe to speak first of all about in response to what Charlotte has said, particularly at the end, Tommy, where Charlotte was talking about I suppose the tactics of the Zionist entity, why the prisoners in particular are so important, and why the death penalty is a means of destroying the resistance and perhaps disabling the resistance entirely. So, your view in response to Charlotte would be great. Thanks, Tommy.
Thank you, Roisin, and thank you, Charlotte and Dr. Saeb. It's hard to know what to say in light of what we've heard this evening. The Zionist regime knows now, blind of its depredations, thought, perversion. The fact that strikes me is that the Israeli Zionists, they don't need any extra mechanism to slaughter, murder, assassinate Palestinians. They have slaughtered a genocidal campaign over the last couple of years against the people of Gaza. On an ongoing basis, they're doing something similar in the West Bank. My understanding of this death penalty is a perversion. It's something that, one, is aimed to attempt to criminalize, in their terms, the resistance by highlighting this gruesome torture of execution. It's almost a piece of drama for them. They'll keep a prisoner 85, 86, 87 days waiting the execution, so the world would know what's happening. And then the idea of putting a rope around someone's neck, executing them, is horrendous. It's a dreadful punishment, totally unnecessary, but it's done with a perversion to attempt to intimidate. But I can't understand how they can think for one moment that it will intimidate Palestinian resistance. It will not. But it's demonstrating the depravity of the Zionist regime, that they would resort to such hideous type of murder. Why they're doing it? One, I think it's possible, as I said, to, if you like, attempt to criminalize, because the whole story is that to execute by firing squad indicates that we're talking about a military operation, or to hang someone by the neck until dead. The implication is that we're talking about a criminal. And that's not the case. Certainly, no rational person would think for a moment that resistance by Palestinians is a criminal offence. But this will be a story that will be spun by the Zionist regime. And there is the spectacle, the weekly, the 90 days to prolong the execution, the period, keeping someone in a death cell for that period of time, the agony that they'll go through, the agony their relatives will go through, anticipating the morning of the execution, and the gruesome pleasure that the executioners and their supporters will take from hearing that it's happening. It's an obscenity that's beyond belief, but at this stage I don't think we can be surprised by what the Zionists will resort to. But as much as I can think of, it's just too horrendous.
Thank you. Thanks, Tommy. It is. I mean, of all the conversations we have had over the last 12 or 18 months, I don't think there's been this sense of, silence even in the room, or, the response is just lost for words. You just don't know how to start. We keep saying depravity and they're disgusting and it's shocking or whatever, and you just feel like it can't get any worse. And then we're also juxtaposing that with the news coming in right now that the people of Iran face existential threat, that they're going to be annihilated tonight. I mean, these aren't strange times that we're living in.
Horrendous times.
Horrendous. This is barbaric. Here we are sitting, our reality now at whatever 10 to 8 on a Tuesday evening in Ireland, in the relative safeness of our homes, but it's so hard to take your mind, like you said, Charlotte, from the conditions that people are facing right now, whether that's in Iran, Lebanon, where you are, or Palestine, in Gaza, in the West Bank, in prisons, Saeb, or not in prisons. There is no safe place if you are anti-Zionist, particularly right now in West Asia. At this point, I'd like to bring in Patricia. I still don't see Abdullah, and if we do see him, will someone let me know so that we give him some speaking time? But Patricia, thanks very much, because you did a lot of work this week, but not this week, for months and months. You're doing an awful lot behind the scenes, and some people might not know what Fight for Palestine is. It's a campaign that was initiated by the Peadar O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum, and you had numerous conferences across Ireland. But maybe if we talk less so about what we've done in the past and what's coming up, Patricia, and how people here on this Zoom call tonight and our friends and our comrades can get involved in the upcoming events that you are organising at the minute.
Yes, indeed, Roisin, and thank you for that. I've been listening to the previous three speakers, Saeb, Tommy and Charlotte, and it defies belief what we're witnessing today, and it's just pure fascism that's spreading across the world. And I was saying to Charlotte on the last Zoom meeting that we were on, that I was speaking to a Palestinian journalist a few weeks ago. He was visiting Ireland, and he said what we are doing is so important. So I would like to appeal to people to come and join this campaign, because the 5 demands are the demands of the Palestinian prisoners. They're not, well, of course there are demands as well, but they're the demands that were identified and called for by their representative body in the West Bank. I hope Abdullah can join us later and he could fill us in.
Yeah.
We certainly are organising a couple of events next week, and we'll keep you posted on that. But it's very important to keep this alive, and very important that we put pressure on our governments, because the people are outraged, and rightly so. But we really must up the ante in this, because this is beyond words. And I just want to say that one of the demands is a global observatory. So I'm so glad to be in contact with Charlotte on that. And the other one is the BDS campaign. It's very important that we get involved in that campaign. And I think basically that's all I have to say for now.
Thank you, Patricia. And yes, those events that are being organised will be published on both the Peadar O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum social sites and our own. Saeb, just when Patricia refers to the demands, the 5 demands there, and Charlotte, you also alluded to them, maybe not in 5 separate terms, but I see you're wearing our badge, Break the Chains of Zionism, and I have it on as well tonight. Now, this slogan was deemed very controversial in October 2023, but the more time goes on, the more relevant, and I think the more acceptable, and the more it makes sense now, particularly maybe to liberals, who initially, maybe it was abstract, what is Zionism? But Saeb, you're wearing your badge tonight, Break the Chains of Zionism. Maybe we could speak a little bit about that. What is BDS is one way, looking at boycott, divest, sanction. But also what Charlotte and Patricia said is that there's a lot of work to be done at home. That sometimes we maybe think, oh, that's for Charlotte's group, the Prisoner Solidarity Network, they'll sort that out. Or, Patricia Campbell's responsible for the prisoners, they're working on that side of things. But we all have a role to play. We all have a duty to play in breaking the chains of Zionism. So, Saeb, how do you interpret that phrase, to break the chains of Zionism?
It's we live in societies today, which is the word fascism, Nazism translate to Zionism straight away without trying to justify this or that. The Zionist elite are ruling definitely West Europe, United States of America, and they're trying to control every juncture of our economical kind of spectrum, internationally or locally. When you see Ireland as a state, the size of the population, roughly 7 million, are the second favorite or the second partner in trade with the Zionist entity. You will wonder what island sell or buys from the Zionist entity when there is a lot of people in Ireland cannot find housing, cannot find like what their parents fought for, the social net to protect them from poverty, or their wages buying power and stuff like that. And suddenly you see the elite, ruling elite, within Fine Gael or Fine Gael or other parties as well, to that fact, left or right in Ireland, are being controlled by a few Zionist elites, some of them linked to the Epstein files as well. Some Irish politicians were in the, without even naming the names, are linked to these kind of things. So you'll understand yourself what kind of world we live in. So our hard work, our own achievement, scientific or research done by our students or by our experts, handed in a golden plate for free to the Zionist entity to integrate that with their own criminal war machines to target and kill Palestinian, Lebanese, Syrian, Iranian, Yemenis, Iraqis, and all of that then marketed to the business kind of class in the West or in Ireland or in the United States of America. This is to guarantee their access to resources, energy, markets, controlling the heart of the world, which is Palestine, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, and controlling the waterways, the skyways. So you benefit out of this. Actually, this is what they are building. They are building a monster which in the future going to destroy every human achievement being won from in centuries. We link to that what this madman Trump come with. He wanted to destroy the Persian civilization tonight, in hours, he said. A civilization which existed for over 7,000 years at least, built with the people were enshrining human rights 6,000-7,000 years ago, building their own schools and literature. Those people like they participated from the love poems to algorithm in humanity. They give us turning points from chemistry to physics, and you come somebody who cannot even spell what the word peace means, or even what except the letters involved in money, as Donald Trump, and deciding he wants to destroy this or that to serve not the interests of his own country. The Zionist elite, the Epstein class, as Professor Mohamed Marandi called it. We are we feel like in a silence and waiting for something to happen, because they reach to the limit, make us not useful even for our own self. We are paralyzed, okay, except we can put point of view, but there is no organization, no frameworks to recruit and to enlighten the people to stand against fascism and against imperialism. The same people who are attacking the ideas which come or spewed out by Trump himself today are they are the ones who's elected him in the United States of America. They elected him in money. Maybe they didn't mean to elect him and to do such a vile things, but it's the response of the people and the elimination of the power of the people, which made those elites controlling the whole kind of Western countries. And thank God we still have a country like Iran stand defending the people in the north before even the global south. Iran is showing the people what is this Western values and Western liberal system is all about. It's about fascism, it's about imperialism, it's about robbing people resources, it's about looting everything on this earth for the not even for the benefit of their own countries or their own collective population, for the few. And this is why we have to organize very hard from now on to fight. Once we fight Zionism, we at least understand we're gonna fight imperialism, and we're going to at least control the resources within country to serve the middle class, the working class, the facilities of the country, the infrastructures of the country, hospitals, education, and this has all been looted from the people in here and taken to serve the criminal monster satanic state of Zionist entity, don't want to call it even. So this is why we have to do our best to defend the Palestinian people, who are the first line of attack against Zionist and imperialist entities.
Yes, thank you, Saeb, for that. I'm going to go over to Barry because Saeb mentioned, the beautiful history of the Persian civilization, and I saw, I think, read somewhere where somebody said, the Persians created algebra and the Yanks created the hamburger. It's kind of what you're saying, Saeb, like when you compare the nature of these and the value system of these two polar countries. It's quite shocking. The other thing is, Barry, that I'd like to touch on is what Saeb talked about and Professor Morandi spoke about as well, as the Epstein class. Now, it's kind of a phrase that he has coined. Now, it's not a phrase that socialists would tend to use or communists would tend to use, because as we know, the ruling class have always been barbaric. They, the only good thing, I suppose, that has come out of the Epstein files is that it's more exposed. And that's only the tip of the iceberg, Saeb. Like, when you think about it, most of the files haven't actually been released. But those that have been released are, everywhere, worldwide. Whoever you are, wherever you are, there's no one trying to justify them or condone them. They're absolutely barbaric and horrific, and some of the things that you read about them, you go, that couldn't be true, could it? And then you go into the files and you realize, the horror story, and it's there in black and white. But as we know, Barry, the ruling class has never been any different. It's always been the system under which we are existing right now, imperialism and capitalism, is barbaric. So I'd like you maybe to comment on that. And it's not to criticize. I actually think the Epstein class or the Epstein network is a good catchphrase, because I think people can identify, they can start to see who the ruling class is, or how the ruling class or their servants have been captured or co-opted. But maybe for those who are new to the idea of socialism, if you could explain, the nature of the ruling class versus the working class.
Don't make it easy, Roisin, whatever you do. That phrase, the Epstein class, would be better phrased the Epstein capitalist class, because we don't want to muddy the waters in any way by people thinking that, if we once got rid of the Epstein class, then we'd have solved all the problems, which of course we know too well isn't the case. And I think that it's important that people understand that, it's not only the people who are Epsteined. They don't have to be Epstein to be as brutal and cruel as capitalism has been, because it kills people by its very existence. It starves people to death. It makes people struggle by the tooth and nail to try and survive within an ever increasing downward spiral for the standards of the majority, the working class. And remember this, that the capitalist class and the ruling class are always and ever the minority within the country. That's the sad part of all of this. The people who control the wealth are a very tiny, tiny minority within the world. The working class, we are the majority, and we have that power. And it's something that it's going to take a bit of time probably to learn. It's going to take a bit of time to understand. But I think that all of these world issues have in fact inspired people to a greater or lesser extent. And it has removed the sort of fog from people's eyes in a lot of ways, in the sense that they began to see what imperialism means. They began to see what capitalism means. They began to see what peace means. Doesn't really mean anything, as has been demonstrated numerous times over the last 2 years. In fact, it has been demonstrated, most of our lifetimes, but it's been particularly brought into sharp focus this last 2 years that peace is actually a weapon that the capitalist class and imperialist class uses against those who it sees as their and perceives and creates as their enemies. The hanging of Palestinian prisoners is just another part of that. We have to understand that political prisoners are just that. They're very highly political. They're a problem for the ruling class in the sense that, they won't go away. And with the amount of prisoners in the Palestinian case, it's clear, very clear, that prison isn't a deterrent. So power is about to attempt to raise the bar yet another bit. It's an example, in my opinion, of a ruling class losing the battle for the hearts and minds, and that it thinks now that the only way is to treat them as animals, as they do, and hang them like a dog. And as Tommy pointed out, it's an attempt to criminalise, and it's an attempt to terrorise. It never was considered to any greater or lesser extent within the liberation struggle here in the Six Counties in the last time from 1969 to 1998. But it was being talked about at the highest levels. But they didn't need to do that. They probably realised that, in a so-called, and I use this term very sparingly, a so-called democracy, that hanging would be a step too far. But I mean, they did it by other methods. They did it by shoot-to-kill policies within the North. I mean, that was something that became very highly utilised in the 80s and 90s within the North. And they also utilised killer gangs to terrorise the people in another way, and similar to what hanging would be attempting to be doing. So power does this. This is just another phase of power trying to exert its power by terrorising people who resist and terrorising, particularly those who support. Families and stuff is going to be saying, well, naturally enough, they don't want to see their sons or daughters killed in any shape, fashion, or form, and they certainly probably don't want to see them hung, because it's a gruesome type of execution. As Tommy pointed out too, it's almost an honourable thing for a political prisoner to be shot by firing squad. But they know that's not what that would create martyrs, even more high-profile martyrs. The other thing too is that the likes of Marwan Barghouti, the Nelson Mandela of Palestine, and Sadat I don't know how is he the PFLP or the DFLP, I don't know which it is, leader within the prison, and many others too. It's an opportunity now to sort of bargain with them as well. Well, let's do a deal. You'll face the rope too. It's a pressure within the jail, the politics of jail, the politics of hanging. We don't think about these things very much. We just think that naturally we're emotionally thinking that these things are terrible, and as they are, of course. But there's also the politics of hanging, and the politics of jail, and the politics of political prisoners, and all of that feeds into the wider struggle against capitalism and imperialism. But it's nothing new, and I am quite confident that the Palestinian prisoners will be well able to analyse all of that and be well able to cope with it. I mean, it would seem incredible that they're going to have the facilities or the ability or be allowed, maybe they would, to hang 9,000 or 10,000 prisoners. I mean, it doesn't even bear thinking about. But and of course it always has the possibility, just like the execution of the 1916 leaders in 1916. it has blowback. It always has a chance of the possibility of serious backfire. It could actually strengthen the struggle in ways. I mean, that's what I think about it. I mean, there's many sort of dialectics in it. There's many ways of looking at it, you know.
Thank you, Barry. And also thank you for reminding us, the ways that we approach all of these unfolding situations, obviously emotionally or from a moral perspective, but it's really important to be political about it, to analyse and to keep thinking through the, scientific socialist lens. And that's not to detach ourselves from our hearts, but
Well, I know it sounds, to say that sounds a bit sort of almost heartless and stuff, but the reality is, that all of these things have political connotations, and all of them, have political answers and political actions. Life has, the very air you breathe has, the food you eat has, the water you drink has. So we can't escape it,
Absolutely. Thank you, Barry. And I'm going to just maybe round off the recording at this stage. We might stay on till about 8:30. Even Abdullah might come in. You never know. But I'm sure if he's travelling, Saeb, I'm sure it's been very difficult for him to tune in. And before we call it a night on the recording, I'd first of all like to thank Charlotte Cates for tuning in from all the way from Lebanon. Absolutely brilliant. We're, very privileged to have you here to explain to us and to talk about, I suppose, the reminder that we all need that these prisoners and these prisons actually are schools of revolution, and that's what's being killed, and that's what the Zionists fear so much. That the nature of revolutionary understanding can grow even in prisons, which is, and that desire, need, that desperation to get rid of the revolutionaries. Well, we're all revolutionaries. We all have a duty to be revolutionary in the way that we speak and in the way that we act. And we cannot wait for the people of Iran or wait for the people of Lebanon or wait for the resistance in Palestine to save us. And we have the utmost respect for the people of Iran, who, tonight especially, who are the only country single-handedly, alone, fighting the Zionist entity, while the rest of the world stays silent. Not one country in the EU has come out to confront Trump, the maniac, tonight, and to condemn that threat, which is also a nuclear threat on Iran as well. It may not be nuclear. And just before we go, Barry, that how will Iran react if the prisoners of Palestine are hanged? You can be damn sure that Iran will respond accordingly and in kind. So before we go, thank you, Charlotte. Thank you, Dr. Saeb Shaat from Belfast with us. Thank you, Barry, Tommy, and Patricia especially for joining us and setting this up tonight. And I just want to say, free Palestine and victory to Iran. Thank you.